So what if the biggest mistake you made this year wasn't, failing to hit your goals, but actually achieving them with flying colors?
Oh, man. That is, that's a heavy question right out of the gate.
I know, right? But seriously, think about that for a second. Have you ever finally achieved something massive, something you mapped out, stressed over, worked toward for months, only to stand there at the finish line and realize you were playing it incredibly safe the entire time?
Right, like you hit the target, but suddenly you see that the target was placed, about 50 miles too close.
Exactly. It's a completely profound and honestly kind of unsettling
Oh,
experience.
completely. You secure the promotion, you launch the side hustle, you save the down payment, and instead of pure euphoria, there is this quiet, nagging suspicion that your so-called impossible dream was actually just the bare minimum of your actual capacity.
Yes, you didn't stretch your limits, you just fulfilled the predictable quota.
Per-
And that feeling of, wait, is this really all there is? That is the perfect launchpad for today's deep dive. We are jumping into the philosophy of Daniel Burrus.
A fantastic topic.
Yeah, we are pulling from his foundational insights on ambition, innovation, and why our biggest, wildest dreams are, quite frankly, still way too small.
And, to really understand the weight of this material, we have to establish exactly who Daniel Burrus is. Because when you hear a phrase like dream bigger, it is very easy to just roll your eyes.
Oh, totally. It sounds like generic motivational speaking.
Right, the kind of thing you see pasted over a picture of a mountain on social media. But Burrus is operating in a completely different arena. He is a globally recognized futurist,
Yeah.
an AI expert, and a strategic advisor for Fortune 500 companies.
Basically, he's the strategist the biggest companies in the world call when their entire industry is about to be completely upended and they need to figure out what happens next.
Right. Exactly. And he pioneered this framework called the anticipatory organization. And I think we should pause here to understand how that actually works, because it really grounds everything else we're going to discuss today.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that.
So most organizations, and honestly most people, are reactionary. They wait for a disruption like, say, a new AI tool or a sudden market crash, and then they scramble to respond.
Right, playing catch up.
Exactly. But Burrus teaches leaders to predict disruption before it happens by separating what he calls hard trends from soft trends.
Okay, wait, let's break that down for everyone listening. What is the mechanical difference between a hard trend and a soft trend?
Well, a hard trend is something that will definitively happen. It is a future fact. So, for example, the global population is aging.
Sure.
That is a hard trend based on demographics. We literally cannot stop it. A soft trend, on the other hand, is an assumption about what might happen.
Ah, I see.
So, for example, assuming that the aging population will all adopt a specific type of wearable health technology, that might happen or, it might not.
Right, it's a guess.
Exactly. And Burrus built his entire career teaching organizations how to base their massive sweeping strategies entirely on hard trends. He isn't selling warm and fuzzy feelings here. He is dealing in the architecture of the future.
Helping companies act with absolute certainty in an uncertain world.
You nailed it.
So the mission for this deep dive is to take that corporate global scale foresight and apply it directly to you, the listener.
Yes.
We want to dismantle the illusion of quote-unquote thinking big. We're going to discover why being realistic is actually a massive psychological trap.
A huge trap.
And finally, we're going to learn the exact step-by-step framework Burrus uses to achieve what looks to the rest of the world like the impossible. Because right now, reading through this source material, it really sounds like we are all programming our life's GPS for the local grocery store,
Right.
while Burrus is holding the blueprints to build a rocket to the moon.
I love that. That visual is so striking. And, to figure out how to build that rocket, we first have to understand why human beings instinctively default to that grocery store trip.
Right. Why do we set the bar so incredibly low when we are absolutely convinced we're setting it high?
Well, Burrus has a core thesis here that kind of hits you right in the ego. He states very plainly that however big you are thinking right now, it is probably too small.
Ouch.
Yeah, there is always, without fail, a bigger big.
And he illustrates this with a pretty humbling personal anecdote in the sources, right?
He does. He writes about looking back at himself in his mid-20s. Now, your mid-20s is typically a time when you feel just bursting with ambition.
Oh, yeah. You think you're going to conquer the world.
Exactly. You are looking at the vast, open horizon of your life. And at the time, Burrus thought he was thinking massive. He thought his goals were completely revolutionary.
Like we all do at that age.
Right. But with the benefit of hindsight, looking back at that young man, he realized his thoughts were actually tiny. If he had just managed to scale up his imagination back then, he would have accomplished far more, much faster.
So it wasn't a lack of effort or like a lack of intelligence?
No, not at all. It was entirely a lack of scale in his imagination. The underlying principle he operates on is an old adage, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Sure, we've all heard that one.
But he elevates it. He says, if your plan doesn't take you significantly further than where you are today, you are essentially planning for stagnation. Success demands a dream that stretches your operational capacity.
Okay, I get the theory, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
We live in a world that is constantly screaming at us to hustle more, do more, optimize every single second of our day.
Oh, absolutely. The hustle culture.
Right. So shouldn't we be content with steady, manageable progress? Why is Burrus insisting that we constantly raise the bar on our own definition of success? Doesn't that just lead to, perpetual burnout and dissatisfaction?
I mean, that is a very valid concern. But it actually stems from a slight misinterpretation of his work.
Okay, how so?
Burrus is not defining the content of your success. He isn't saying everyone needs to build a billion-dollar tech conglomerate or, become a global celebrity.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he is saying, take your own definition of success, whether that involves your community garden, your family life, your art, or your small business, and stretch that specific vision to its absolute limits.
So it's not about adopting his corporate goals. It's about applying a magnifying glass to whatever you actually care about.
Exactly, and magnifying them based on where the world is heading, not just where it is today.
Tying back to those hard trends.
Right. The world is changing exponentially, largely due to the very technologies Burrus studies. If your vision of your own future is small and linear, you are going to be overwhelmed by a world that is moving at an exponential rate.
That makes a lot of sense.
You need a bigger vision just to maintain your footing and capture the opportunities that are, about to exist.
Okay, so if raising the bar and stretching our vision is mathematically crucial for surviving the future, why do so few people actually do it? Because it isn't laziness, right?
No, definitely not.
And it isn't a lack of talent. According to the source material, the greatest enemy of the bigger big is realism.
Yes, realism is the ultimate dream killer masquerading as common sense.
It's so true. Burrus uses this fascinating thought experiment to drive this home. He says, think about planning your ultimate, pull out all the stops, big vacation.
Listeners, really visualize it for a second.
Yeah, where are you going? Are you in a villa? Are you on a beach? You got it.
Now, compare that big vacation you just imagined to a big vacation planned by someone like Bill Gates or Sir Richard Branson.
The contrast is immediate, isn't it?
Oh, it's absurd.
Your big vacation might be a luxury resort in Hawaii for 2 weeks. Their big vacation might involve chartering a private research vessel to the Antarctic, or, in Branson's case, literally building a commercial spacecraft to leave the atmosphere. Right, but I look at Richard Branson and think, well, he has billions of dollars, I have a mortgage. Is it really a fair comparison? It's incredibly easy to think big when your bank account has, a comma in it for every day of the week.
And see, Burrus anticipates that exact defense mechanism.
He does.
Yes, and he flips the causality completely on its head. What's fascinating here is he poses a counterintuitive point. Maybe Bill Gates and Richard Branson have more money precisely because they were able to think bigger about making money in the first place.
Whoa. So the wealth didn't create the capacity for big thinking.
The capacity for big thinking created the wealth.
That is wow.
That is the core argument. It is an issue of cognitive capacity. If you cannot imagine it, you will never build the infrastructure to achieve it. The imagination gap precedes the wealth gap, the achievement gap, and the innovation gap.
To ground this, he shares his own experience as an author, and the psychology behind it is incredibly revealing.
It really is.
He talks about the goal-setting phase for his book Flash Foresight. Initially, he was like every other author on the planet. His big goal was to be a New York Times bestseller.
Which is, let's be honest, a very respectable standard pinnacle of success in the publishing world.
Absolutely. But then he stopped and applied his own anticipatory framework. He decided he didn't just want the New York Times list.
Right.
He wanted the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. He wanted to be #1 on Amazon. He wanted to be at the top of every known list simultaneously. And this is the exact moment that most people completely shrink their goals.
Oh, without a doubt.
The rational brain steps in, puts a heavy hand on your shoulder, and says, hey, let's get realistic.
And we actually need to look at what is happening in the brain during that moment because it's biological.
Really?
Yeah, when you set a massive, seemingly impossible goal, the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, often triggers a literal threat response.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a figure of speech.
No, the sheer scale of the unknown causes genuine anxiety. So realistic thinking is often just a soothing mechanism. It is your brain trying to turn off the anxiety by lowering the stakes.
That makes so much sense.
Right. Most authors in Burrus's situation will soothe themselves by saying, well, realistically, only one person can be number one on all those lists at the same time. I shouldn't set myself up for failure.
But by soothing that anxiety, you are actively self-sabotaging. Because if you only aim for the New York Times list, you are only building a strategy for the New York Times list.
Exactly.
You aren't building a strategy for global dominance, so you'll never accidentally achieve it.
You build the infrastructure for the goal you set. Small goal, small infrastructure.
Wow.
The voice of realism feels like it is protecting you from disappointment, and it feels like wisdom. But the cost of that realism is staggering. People willingly shrink their own horizons.
They just box themselves in.
They proactively lower their expectations to match what they believe is mathematically probable, and as a direct result, they achieve just a fraction of their potential.
Okay, but refusing to be realistic is great in theory. It looks fantastic on a vision board.
Mhm.
But without a concrete mechanism to get there, it's really just daydreaming, right?
Yes.
How do we actually bypass that threat response and build a path to an impossible goal?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where Burrus shifts from being a philosopher to being a master tactician.
Right. Burrus didn't just sit there wishing his book would hit all those lists. He took his already unrealistic goal and blew completely past it.
He did.
He decided Flash Foresight wouldn't just be #1 on Amazon overall. It would be #1 in every single category. He didn't want it to just be #1 in the US. He wanted Europe and Asia. He decided he wanted this book to be required reading all over the world.
A global big vision.
Yeah, that was his global big vision.
And here's the mechanical secret to his success. This is really the fulcrum of everything we are discussing today.
Listeners, pay attention to this part.
Once you visualize that terrifyingly huge, bigger big, you must immediately ask yourself a very specific two-part question. He asks, what are the strategies to accomplish the bigger big? What would it take?
What would it take?
What would it take?
Think about the brain like a search engine. If you look at a massive goal and type in, I can't do this, the search engine returns 0 results. The problem-solving protocol is just terminated.
Terminated instantly.
But when you ask, what would it take to do that?
Yeah.
You're changing the query.
You are forcing your brain to accept the premise that a path actually exists. And biologically, you are shifting the workload from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function and problem-solving center of the brain.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Once you ask, what would it take, you stop listing excuses and you start listing requirements.
And the factual outcomes from the source material are staggering.
They really are.
The book became a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. It became #1 on Amazon in every single category for a significant amount of time. It hit #1 internationally. The largest newspaper in China devoted an entire full page to his book. And today, just as he envisioned, it is required reading for executives at massive Fortune 500 companies.
Because think about it. The strategy to get a full-page feature in a Chinese newspaper is entirely different from the strategy to get a local book review in your hometown.
Completely different.
Asking, what would it take, forces you to build the global strategy from day one.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to push back again, especially for the entrepreneurs listening. Writing a book is one thing. A best-selling author has a publisher. They have publicists.
Right.
What about starting a business? People are going to listen to this and say, well, I'd love to think bigger, but I don't have venture capital.
Yeah.
It takes money to make money, and that's just a hard fact.
It is easily the most common defense mechanism in the business world. I like the capital, therefore I must shrink the vision.
Right.
But the source material details how Burrus shattered this exact excuse.
Yeah.
He applied this principle to much more than just publishing. He started 6 innovative companies. 6. Ranging from smartphone and tablet apps to, get this, an experimental aircraft company.
Wait, really?
Yes, and he started all 6 of these companies without traditional investors.
Okay, let's slow down and look at the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
How do you possibly build an experimental aircraft company without millions in venture capital? That sounds literally impossible.
By using the exact framework we just discussed, he asked, what would it take to build an experimental aircraft company without traditional investor capital?
And what happened?
Well, the moment you ask that, you realize that venture capital is just one tool. It is a crutch used to buy things like materials, engineering time, and manufacturing facilities.
Sorry.
If you don't have the cash to buy those things, you have to find alternative ways to acquire them.
So instead of asking, how do we get money to buy parts,
Uh-huh.
you ask how to get the parts.
Precisely. Asking the right question forces you to leverage strategy over cash. It leads you to alternative models. For instance, you can use a pre-sale model. You shift the financial risk to the end user who desperately wants the innovation, and they provide the working capital up front to fund the manufacturing.
Oh, wow.
Or you form strategic partnerships. You go to a materials manufacturer and offer them exclusivity or a percentage of future revenue in exchange for the parts you need today. You share resources with university labs.
So the realistic person stops at, I don't have money.
Right.
But the anticipatory thinker isolates exactly what the money was supposed to buy and just finds another way to acquire it.
Exactly. It completely reframes the concept of an obstacle.
An obstacle isn't a stop sign. It's just a variable in the what would it take equation.
It moves you from being a passive victim of your circumstances to an active architect of your reality.
I love that. Now, we've talked about global book launches and aviation tech, but the math of this bigger big breaks down if we can't apply it to the average Tuesday.
Very true.
Let's look at how this changes something as mundane as a job hunt, or just evaluating where you are in your daily life right now.
Well, Burrus introduces a brilliant hierarchy of work to address exactly this. He breaks it down into 3 levels: a job, a career, and a calling.
Okay.
If you are currently looking for a job, you need to pause, think bigger, and aim for a career.
Because a job is essentially just a transaction. You are trading hours for dollars to pay the bills.
Right.
While a career implies a trajectory, you are investing time for status, growth, and long-term payoff.
But he doesn't stop there. He says if you already have a career, you still need to think bigger. You need to look for your true calling.
So what does this all mean? How does the listener sitting in traffic right now actually identify what their calling is? How do they know if they are just comfortably numb in a career or if they've found the real thing?
Burrus offers a profound litmus test for this. He provides 3 questions you have to ask yourself.
All right, what are they?
First, what's my real calling? Second, what was I put on this planet to do?
Heavy question.
Very. And third, which I think is the most striking and practical metric, what is the one thing that would make me not care whether it's Monday or Friday because I enjoy what I'm doing every day?
Wow. Not care whether it's Monday or Friday. That is such a visceral way to measure alignment.
It really is.
I mean, we build our entire modern culture around the dread of Monday morning and the celebration of Friday afternoon. Thank God it's Friday.
Right. Everyone lives for the weekend.
If you are living for Friday, or if Sunday night fills you with that low-grade sense of dread, you might have a highly successful career, but you definitively do not have a calling.
It is the ultimate indicator of finding your specific bigger big. When you find the thing that is actually meant for you, the friction of time just disappears.
Yeah.
A career often feels like pushing a boulder up a hill. It takes constant, disciplined effort. A calling is entirely different. You aren't pushing anymore. You're being pulled forward by the work itself.
So to synthesize this core message for you, the listener, when you get that next flash of inspiration, or when you are setting your goals for the next quarter, don't just put your head down and execute your latest big thought.
No, don't do it.
Stop. Pause the machinery of your life. Look at that goal. Recognize that it is probably a grocery store run disguised as a moonshot, and actively look for the bigger thing.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Burrus makes an incredible promise here. He says that if you consistently pause, find the bigger thing, and ask, what would it take? Your future will be far more amazing than your past.
I believe it.
And even more importantly, it will be vastly more amazing than you initially thought was mathematically or realistically possible. You stop letting an artificial sense of realism dictate the boundaries of your life.
We spent this entire deep dive talking about applying this framework to your career, your business, and your monumental goals. But I want to leave you with a different angle to ponder tonight.
Oh, this is a good one.
What happens if you apply the what would it take framework to the people around you? If you stop being realistic about what a friendship, a partnership, or a marriage looks like,
Wow.
if you stopped accepting the bare minimum communication or the standard routine,
Mhm.
What is the bigger bake for your relationships? If asking what would it take can build an experimental aircraft without a dime of investor capital, imagine what it could build at your own dinner table.